Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about my ICAI campus experience. So first up is registration. So these are some of the things that you really need to focus on while filling your registration form and like while making your profile. So first of all is achievements and hobbies. So herein mention all the achievements that you have, but don't go too far down the years. And hobbies also you need to mention it very clearly. Don't leave it empty because these are some of the things that are really considered when the company shortlist you. Then the extracurricular activities again very important, and you can pick those from your resumes also, or write some additional things which you could not mention in your CV. Then in mobility, so there's a separate tab regarding mobility wherein you have to mention whether you are open to move to some particular country. So I would suggest that choose all the companies for now, so that you get shortlisted by more companies, and then you can make your decision as per your preference. Then coming to campus, which campus to choose? So I chose the Delhi campus, and the reason behind it was that in Mumbai campus there is often a lot of competition. Usually, all the rankers choose the Mumbai campus only. So even if there are quite a few companies coming there, the chances of you getting selected without a rank are less there. And between Bangalore and Delhi, I selected Delhi because it is my hometown. So I have a preference for that. Then salary expectation. Here I would suggest that mention whatever least expectation it is showing to you in the drop down, because first of all, whatever salary you choose does not mean that you'll be offered that salary only. It just means that the company who are offering that amount, who are ready to offer that amount, will be shortlisting you. So if you set a very high expectation, let's say 10 LPA or something, then the companies would be offering less, would not shortlist you only. So here I would recommend go for the minimum option so that more and more companies shortlist you, and then you can make your choice. Then mock interviews again very important. So this is a new feature introduced by ICI, and please make use of it. It is a very nice interview and it is a very good practice. So they hire professionals who take your interview, give you feedback so that you perform well on the D day basically. So it is a very grilling interview also. It is a very kind of pressure test kind of a thing and puts you in that situation. So please opt for it and actually go for the interviews. Then after my registration, a few days after the registration, as per the schedule shared by ICI in their announcement, the company shortlist you, and the companies that shortlisted you start appearing on the portal. And then you have to give consent for those companies. So in Delhi campus, there were around 38 to 40 companies who came during our campus, and I got shortlisted by some 34, 35 companies. So, and I gave consent for four companies. So these are the maximum number of companies. That is four companies that you can select for which you will be taking the interviews. You have to select four companies. So I selected ITC, Hero Motocorp, Vodafone Idea, and HCL. So one thing here that it is preferable to select all the companies from one day only. So the day concept here is that the companies who offer more CTC come on the initial days, that is day one, day two, and as the day increases, the CTC kind of decreases. So I would say that preferably select all the companies from one day, because if you get selected by your first company, let's say, then you cannot take interviews for the remaining three companies. So that is kind of a rule. So if you select companies from two different days, you won't even have to get to sit for the interviews for the companies coming on the second day or something. But again, if you have very good options and have all day one companies, then you can select all the four companies in the first round of consent only. However, if you don't get very good companies or profiles that you wanted, so there is a possibility that in the second round of shortlisting, which is few days after the first round of shortlisting, then you can select those companies. So people usually select three companies in their first round and one company in the second round. Then give consent by the end of the day only. So this is the thing that happened to me. So I selected my four companies till like afternoon or something, and then in the evening four more companies were added to my shortlist. And then more often than not you cannot change it, but we could at that point of time, but you can generally not change the shortlisting. So it is better to give your consent only at the end of the day after going through the entire list. Then coming to the pre-interview round, so some companies, and it is not necessary for all the companies to have these rounds, but few companies may still have pre-interview rounds, like they may have group discussions or something like that, in order to filter out majority of the students so that they can take the interview of the remaining students in a single day. So for my pre-interview rounds, out of the four companies that I selected, three had a pre-interview round. So the first is Hero Motocorp. It was held like a day before the interview process. So there was a group discussion in the evening around 5. We were given the links to the Zoom meeting or Teams meeting in order for the group discussion to happen. And the topic that I was given was so at that time we had the budget rolled out for the financial year, and there was a lot of capex expenditure that government was incurring. So we had to give our opinion on that, like what will be the impact, positives and negatives. So that was the topic that we were given, and it was like a 40-45 minutes group discussion. So initially we were all given a chance to open, so everyone was given a chance to speak, and then the house was open for the discussion. So they were and then we were to give the conclusion. So this was the thing, and what they were looking for there was that whether you are able to put forward your opinion, how much unique your opinion is. And initially they also they gave us the time to actually Google everything and be thorough with the topic, so that it is not the lack of knowledge of the topic that is keeping us from performing good in the GD. Then coming to ITC, so ITC rolled out a form few days before the interview. So it was a very, very comprehensive and detailed form, and in which we had to put our educational qualifications, our academic achievements, details about our CA final exams, about inter and everything. And there were certain psychological questions also as to what a tough situation that you face. There were questions related to articleship, that what were the major recommendations that you give to your client that were accepted, what changes did they lead to, and some of the recommendations that were not accepted, and how did you deal with it. Then there were questions as to how will your goals align to the vision and mission of ITC. What is the best way in which you can contribute to our growth, and anything that something that you did that portrayed thought leadership and excellence. So things like that were asked in the form, and they were again asked from me in the interview, some of those questions. Then about Vodafone Idea. In Vodafone Idea, a day before, I had a AI based interview. So in that, there were questions that were displayed on my computer screen for like 10 seconds, and then the recording immediately started for 2 minutes, and I had to answer those questions. They were recorded and were viewed by the organization, and students were shortlisted basis that. So those questions were mainly HR questions or psychological questions only, which you don't need to prepare for, and you can answer on the spot. Then coming to the interviews. So all the interviews take place on a single day. So I had a virtual campus, and all the interviews took place on a single day, back to back. So whatever your schedule for the interview is, a mail is usually rolled out a day prior, and a roster is out that this is your schedule for this company's interview. So some of the times it is also possible that some interview might just overlap with some other interview. So this happened with my friends also. In that case, you have no option but to select a particular company for which you want to actually take the interviews. But what happened in one of the cases also was, because a friend of mine could not give the interview because of the overlapping, so the company called him after and asked if he wants to reschedule the interview. So he did, and he was able to give the interview for the second company also. So you can also possibly negotiate or talk to the company for which you missed the interview, give them a reason, and they might reschedule it. So my first interview for the day was Hero Motocorp interview. It was around 10 a.m. in the morning or something, and Hero Motocorp offered a management trainee profile, which was basically a plant-based role only. It was a plant finance kind of a job, because I asked my seniors about it who are actually working there. So it was a plant-based job only. They would relocate you to a particular plant, and you would handle finances and everything there. So that was the role. Then about the interview, it was a three people panel. So one was the person who would be asking HR questions, and two people were heads from their respective department who would be asking you technical questions. So first question always is tell us something about yourself, or give a brief introduction, or walk us through your CV. So questions like that. So be prepared with this question, because that will for sure be asked in all the interviews. Then about articleship experience, another very important thing, because considering we have only done articleship and are freshers in that sense, so this is the topic that is most relevant, and they want to understand what kind of grip do you have over things that you did, to be able to analyze whether you'll be able to actually do the work that they'll be offering you. So they are interested in what you did till now in your articleship. So this question will be asked a lot, and on the basis of the answer that you give to this question, other questions will be asked from you. So be very thorough about each thing that you say in this answer, that you did this particular thing. Then be backed up, read about it and read the relevant indias pertaining to that particular thing. For example, in articleship experience, so they'll be asking you like, so tell us some interesting thing that you so I did my articleship in audit, so they might ask you that, some interesting thing that you came across while auditing. So I always had two, three examples, keep two, three examples and four, five stories in hand about, difficult situations. How did you get through them? So keep those things handy. So I used to talk about business combination transaction, which I came across for a client. So, and then another question, that the follow-up question that would come would obviously be about in India's 103. How did you apply it in that case? What do you know? When do we recognize that it is business combination? What is business? How do you differentiate it from asset acquisition? What is the treatment in the books of both acquire, and also from a taxation perspective? So be prepared from every aspect, whatever you say in that answer to that question. And then I also talked about leases, because I worked on leases in three different gaps, basically India as, AS, and US gap. So that was very interesting. So I used to highlight that also, and the interviewer more often than not asked me a follow up question on that. Then about technical questions. So one of the person already said that, whatever technical questions I'll be asking, I don't expect you to know the answer to each one of them. So don't be scared if you're not able to answer them, because they're quite a high level question, something I know you might not have done in your articleship or even read about in detail in your curriculum. So the first question was about goodwill impairment. What is goodwill? How do we impair it? And then when you say that, then they'll also ask you about how do you actually compute the market value. So this kind of question. And then about ESOP valuation, how are ESOPs valued? So that was asked in detail. And then related party transaction. What is related party transactions? What do you mean by related parties? And they give me a situation that, for example, two companies have a KMP in common. Then would those two companies be related to each other? So these kind of questions were asked. So it was more or less India centric interview. So they'll ask you a lot of questions from India. So you need to have a thorough understanding of that. And then about my articleship experience also. So be very thorough with your articleship experience. So then they went on to ask about some basic questions such as why hero and why not EY. So you have to somehow convince them as to why you don't want to continue with the CA firm and move to the industry. So that was about it. And then the duration of this round was roughly 30 to 40 minutes. And then immediately after this round got over, after like 10 minutes, I got a call from their HR that you have been shortlisted, and in 15 minutes, we'll have your CFO round. So, luckily, my next interview, which was Vodafone interview, was like after half hours or like 45 minutes after the my hero interview. So, I had the time in between to have the CFO round. So, in some of the cases, it might, uh, overlap with other interviews. In that case, maybe, it is said that you have to choose between both the companies, but one of my friends had the situation, so he somehow convinced the HR, so he could not give the other interview. And after the time slot, the HR called and asked him why he could not give the interview. He gave a legitimate reason, and so they rescheduled his interview. So you could also probably negotiate with the company. Then in my CFO round, it was hardly a 10-15 minutes round, which was basically just to judge, whether I'm culturally fit to be a part of their organization and to know me as a person, and not so much a technical interview. So the two people who were present there, one was the CFO and the other was the HR head. So they asked some basic HR questions about myself, walk us through your CV, and from the CV also they picked two, three questions like what you did in this particular role, and what is this about. So about that, and then they went on to ask about my articleship, where I did my articleship from, what I did in that, what were some of the clients I audited, what are the areas I handle. And then they also asked me about the future goals, as to how I think that my future goals would align with the hero's vision and mission. So those kind of questions were asked. And then the question which is asked in almost all the interviews, that is, do you have any questions for us? So please also be prepared. By prepared, I don't mean again learn questions, but yeah, try to pick questions from your interview itself. For example, here I was asked more about electric vehicles. So I asked them a question about that only, like what are the plans of hero about this, and how do they see themselves in this particular domain. So try and pick questions which are not very, very mundane and which everyone uses basically. So try to be very unique and pick something from the interview which highlights that you were present mentally during interviews and you're not just a nerd who just ratify all the questions and just blurt it out during the interview. So you can do that too. Then coming to my next interview, that is the Vodafone interview. So after my CFO round during Hero, I again got a call from Hero that, so in my interview itself, they told that, if we shortlist you, how long will you take to give a consent or something like that. So I was pretty sure that I would be selected. So after the round, I got a call from the HR that you've been selected for Hero. Please give your consent in like the next 10-15 minutes. So I told her that, so after the CFO round, after 10-15 minutes, I had my Vodafone interview only. So I told her that, it would be fair because, I want to sit for other interviews also and see how it goes and then make a, wise decision when I have opportunities in hand. So I would not be able to give a consent right away. So she try to put a bit of pressure that, no, 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 we have only till 12 o'clock or something that you can give your consent. After that, we'll send the list. So I had to say apologetically that, if that's the case, take the answer for no as of now, but I would be able to give a better decision once I get through with my other interview also. So at that point of time, she said, okay, I'm putting your answer as no then. And then after 5 minutes, she called me again. She said, that, okay, you give your next interview, but do let us know after the interview whether you want to continue with Hero or not. So I said, okay. Then immediately after that, I had my Vodafone interview. It even started a bit earlier, like my Vodafone interview started a bit earlier, like 5-10 minutes earlier. So Vodafone was offering a management trainee profile. So I really loved the profile that Vodafone was offering. If it was a typical leadership program, it was called Vodafone Idea leadership program, and they were offering a management trainee role. So it was basically a 6-month role wherein you will be doing different stints in different departments of the business, so that you have a holistic view of how a business as a whole functions. So for example, you have 3-4 weeks of marketing stint, then you have finance, and you have budgeting, cost control. Then manufacturing was not applicable in this case, but yeah, plant visits and something like that. So basically, it is basically for you to understand the business as a whole. So I really like the role here. Then coming to my Vodafone interview, it was again a 30 to 40 minutes interview, and it was a three people panel interview. One was the HR and two people were there to ask me technical questions. And it started with introduction about my articleship experience, like Hero only. So most of the companies start with this only just to make you more comfortable and know about what you have done professionally till now. And then they asked me about what my favorite index is, and so yeah, here don't ever say revenue because they will grill you like anything if you say revenue recognition, because they have very thorough knowledge considering that they have research about them, their business models also, and it is one of the important aspects. So don't say that because in no way our theoretical knowledge would match what they practically know about. So say any India's but 115. But anyhow, they then went on to ask me about India's 115 as to how is the revenue recognized. So I told them the 5-step model of recognition. And then they asked me what is the difference between 115 and the AS9. So this is a very, very frequently asked topics, 115 and leases also. What are the changes in leases? So be thoroughly prepared with them. So what are the recent changes and why was there a need to, make whatever changes were made recently in this particular India's. And then they asked me a very typical question which was not asked from me in any of the other interviews. So they gave me a case. It was basically investment decision case. So they said that, let's say Vodafone is a cash rich company and we want to invest in a particular company and acquire a company. What are the particular aspects or what all factors you would consider in making that investment decision? So usually a person would just throw random ideas which come to our head. But thanks to whatever I've prepared for my consulting interviews, I gave a very comprehensive and a methodical answer. I made a proper framework and considered both quantitative and qualitative factors. So that is very important. So even if you have not prepared for consulting interviews or don't know what frameworks are, just whenever such a broad question is thrown at you, try and measure it from both quantitative and qualitative aspects. Don't just get into quantitative bits like, we would look at ratios, NPV, IRR, and things like that, or we'll do a comparative analysis of that company and other close competitors of that company, but also highlight the qualitative aspects such as, whether taking over that particular particular company would be culturally fit with our organization, and whether you'll be able to, kind of amalgamate both the companies together culturally and considering all the non-financial aspects. Then also talk about the, exit opportunities. So these kind of points will get you, these kind of things will get you brownie points in the interview. And then the last thing, that is questions for us. So in that again, try to ask very company specific questions. And here they also asked me news related to Vodafone, recent news, or your opinion about the telecom sector. How bullish are you about it? And some questions about the economy as well. That how is the Indian economy performing with respect to the world economy? What is your opinion? So things like that can also be usually asked in an interview. Then before I had to, so after my Vodafone interview, I got a mail from the HR that you have been shortlisted for the VILP program, and you can give your consent for this program till 5 p.m. Otherwise, we'll consider it as deemed rejection. So luckily, again, before I had to give my acceptance for Vodafone, I had my third interview, that is the ITC interview. So I took that interview. So ITC was offering an assistant manager profile, the assistant manager in finance, and it was broadly those things only which are typically done in an industry and for which CAs are usually hired, which is basically a controllership kind of a job, and also it involved a lot of internal audit. So it was more of an internal audit centric profile. Then it was again a three people panel interview, and it started with introductions and focus on so in this interview there was a lot of focus on my articleship, as to what I did in my articleship and how, what kind of grip do I have over the things that I did. Because obviously we as freshers wouldn't have much knowledge about the things that they are hiring us to do, but they want to understand that if you're taught a certain thing, whether how much kind of grasp we have and how much is our understanding capability, how much hold do we have over things that we have been doing for the past 3 years during our articleship. So those are the things they were trying to analyze here. So they started with asking me about my articleship, and there was this one person who would ask me throughout my interview. He asked me like 4 or 5 times that, tell me something more that you did in your articleship, tell me something more interesting, something unique that you found out. So the objective of doing that was basically to, for you to speak up as to what you did, so that later on when they cross question you on that particular topic only, you cannot say that, I didn't do that in my articleship, or I didn't work on it, so I don't have knowledge about it. So first they ask you what you know about, and then question you on that topic. So whatever you speak in this particular answer, be very careful that every word you say, you are ready to back it up with, you can speak on that topic for 2 3 minutes. So I used to highlight two very unique things that I did in my articleship during audit. So there was this business combination transaction, and the other was about leases, its treatment as per three different gaps, that is the AS, Indias, and US gap. So these are the things that I usually highlighted in my interview. So I was usually cross questioned also a lot on these topics. So I was well prepared. So about business combinations, they asked me about the accounting entries. What do we mean by business combination? How do we differentiate it from asset acquisition? And what are the changes in the current AS from the previous AS? And then also there was the other person. So one person was asking me about the accounting treatment of everything, and the other person was asking me about the tax treatment of everything. So then the other person asked me about the tax treatment about business combination in both the books of acquiree and the acquirer. So they also asked me, so in one case I said that, we'll treat it as slum sale. And so they asked me what slum sale is, how is it treated. And then from the other, like the acquirer's perspective, they asked me about the block of assets concept, like what is the block of assets and WDV method and things like that. Then leases, again, they asked me about what accounting treatment we did and what are the different accounting treatment of leases in all the three different gaps, because I highlighted that earlier. And the changes that are made in the leases, like in India's 116. So that was also asked for me. So here again, I would like to highlight that basically you are the one who is directing the course of your interview. So whatever, say something intriguing in the beginning, that is in your introduction question or in your articleship experience, so that the other person is kind of attracted or bent towards asking you that particular question only, which you highlighted in your answer and which you would have prepared also earlier. So it is actually in your hand where the interview will go, and you can very well leverage it to your advantage. Then they will also ask me about psychological questions. So in ITC, we had to fill a form also, like prior to the interview. So in that form, there were a lot of psychological questions as to what we did in articleship, and any recommendations that I gave which were actually adopted, and some recommendations which were not adopted, and the how did I feel about it, and how did I dealt with that particular situation. And then some questions like, how are my goals aligned to ITC's vision and mission, what I did in past that kind of displays thought leadership and excellence, and things like that were asked. And how do I be able to contribute the best to ITC, in what way can I contribute to its growth and development. And then some accounting questions were again also asked. So they asked me a lot of accounting entries about credit sales. Then they incorporated bad debts in that, GST and TDS. So be prepared with these kind of complex entries. And then again questions for them. So that was about my ITC interview. Yeah, so before I could get an answer from ITC, it was almost 5 o'clock, and I had to give a decision about Vodafone. So about Hero, so right after I had my Vodafone interview, they called me again then to ask me about my decision. So because I got Vodafone, I apologetically, rejected their offer. So that was about Hero. Then about HCL. So in HCL there was a lot of misunderstanding. So they were offering three profiles with three different CTCs, but with the same role. So I selected the first one, but somehow they didn't contact us before the interview, a day prior or even on the day of interview. There was no communication from HCL. So that was a very panic moment for all of us. But then later on during the day, they communicated that that profile was only for rankers and not for you all, although that profile was appearing on our portal. So obviously we would assume that it was for us, but that was apparently not the case. So it was so they said that they will be taking interviews on the second day, and that would be a lower CTC for all the non-rankers. So that option was also gone. So basically out of my four options, one of the options was wasted, if I say. So then coming back to Vodafone and ITC. So between Vodafone and ITC, I talked to a lot of people. So rather than going on the brand name or anything of that sort, I went after profile. So Vodafone's profile was really really appealing, and it was something I wanted to do. It was an actual management trainee role. So I finally gave my consent for Vodafone India leadership program. So that's how I got the job, and that was about my experience of the campus. Then coming to the tips and tricks. So these are some of the things that you should really keep in mind, and it'll give you a good head start. So fill the profile in depth. Don't take it for granted, because that is the first point of contact the company has with you, and they will make an opinion about you based on that profile, and they will also shortlist you based on that profile, apart from your resume, of course. So fill the profile in detail, and especially the extracurriculars and achievements, those kind of topics, those kind of qualitative topics are really really important. Then build a good CV, of course, very important. That is the basis of you getting selected for any interview. So I've made a separate video on also on this, so you can refer to that. Then look for profile also. So a lot of times students just go for the brand names that they just hear such big companies offering them jobs, and they just blindly go for it. So don't do that. Look for also the profile that they are offering, and whether it is something you really want to do in your career. Then select companies at the end of the day. Very, very important. So this happened with me also. Initially, when we have to give a consent for four companies, like we have to select four companies for which we want to give the interview. Then I gave consent for like in the afternoon, that this is the list of companies that have selected me. So I selected four companies out of it, and that's it. Then in the evening, when I again checked the portal, I saw that four more companies actually selected me. So usually you cannot change your consent after giving the consent, but luckily I was able to change it then. So at that time, I changed one of the options to HCL, and HCL. So yeah. Then prepare for the interviews. Don't take the interviews for granted. And by prepared here, I do not mean that write every question and answer down. And but also I don't mean that go unprepared and deal with all the questions on the spot. So I would say just write broad pointers for very for questions will be coming your way. For example, your introduction, or walk us through your CV. And so from in the question, like walk us from your CV also, be very thorough and know your CV inside out. Then stay updated on news, very important. So during our CA final exams, we have lost touch with news, and we could not be very consistent with reading news. So after that, develop a habit of reading news, especially the business and the finance news, and any recent major changes in businesses, or like major mergers and acquisitions, or any frauds that have come up with. So those are the things, or like budgets. These are the things that will usually asked in the interview. Then keep your laptop charged, very very important. I would say even keep a backup laptop if you have, or keep your mobile phones charged, keep everything charged. Keep backup for internet and power cuts, because these things happen, and although the companies do understand, most of the companies do understand, but of course it is very frustrating, because they again have to reschedule an interview, so they lose they lose interest in that. It is very human. And then communicate, be very very communicative. The interviewer is also a person. So if you're having a problem, let's say in GD, you're not able to understand the topic, then be vocal about it instead of just not saying anything during your GD. Just say you don't know about the topic, and they will probably let you, research about it. And then communicate everything. Let's say your interviews are overlapping. Don't say that, my interviews are overlapping. That is, I prefer that company over yours. Don't be that blunt. But yeah, try and talk to people. Try and negotiate. There is no hard and fast as such. Companies do understand whatever problems you're facing. So be very, very communicative. Then join meeting 10-15 minutes prior, because at the end moment there are a lot of faults that occur. Sometimes our headphones aren't working, we aren't audible, or there's a network issue, or the interview itself might get preponed. Mine got preponed by 10th minutes, so that is also possible. So be active throughout the day, be active on your mobile phone. So yeah, just be active. And it's okay to not know everything. Don't panic that you don't know anything. The questions that they are asking you in the interview, it is fine. You can just say that, I don't know about it, and probably I'll just go back after the interview and brush about it. So just say it, be vocal about it, that you don't know anything, and don't panic. Not knowing an answer does not mean that you would be rejected. It is just about your confidence, the way you deliver, and the way you portray yourself. That is more important. And the knowledge you have, about your articleship, that is also again very important. So prepare for that also. Whatever you've done in your articleship, make summary about it. Whatever areas, if you have done auditing, then maybe whatever areas you have audited, what are processes you adopted. This knowledge will come in handy during the interviews and is very important. Then be very very confident. So if you are confident, they will sense it. If you are nervous, they will sense it. So give a very confident vibe. Be confident, and you are prepared, and you will be able to get through it. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope it helped. Do let me know in case you have any queries, questions, or any suggestions for me. Thank you so much. Please do like, share, and subscribe.